So have you ever watched a horror movie and you thought to yourself, like, what is the killer doing when he's not on the screen? Is he just like sitting in a corner somewhere? Well, voyeurs and insomniacs rejoice because In a Violent Nature came out and answers your question. But I got to tell you, the answer to that question, not that interesting. So In a Violent Nature is Shudder's most recent movie, and it's just trying to innovate on the slasher genre. Think Friday the 13th, but the entire movie is going to take place from the killer's point of view. And by doing that, you're obviously going to open yourself up to some limitations and difficulties of filming when you have no character development, you have nobody else to spend screen time with besides one guy. When you do get into the reviews of this movie, I can see two things coming up very consistently. And one of them is going to be how bold and innovative this movie is. I mean, I agree it is commendable that they attempted this. I think this is a very unique premise. I'm glad we got to see it. The second one you're probably going to hear a lot in a lot of different reviews is about a single kill scene in particular, how good it is, an all-timer. It's related to yoga. I agree with that. I think it's a phenomenal kill scene, but those are probably going to be the only two consistent you're going to hear in reviews about this movie. And going a little bit further into that, there really is no plot to this movie. It is just a rehash Friday the 13th. You just follow the killer around for the entire movie from his point of view. So you obviously open yourself up to some limitations and difficulties by doing this because you have no character development, no real dialogue. You're just going to spend the vast majority of the movie, all but 5 minutes or so, following one killer around from his point of view. And immediately getting into it, this movie is innovational and is an experiment, so I can respect it for that. That's the biggest positive I have to say about this movie. I mean, going into this movie, I heard a huge mixed bag of reviews. Some people were super excited to see this movie, had a lot of expectations, thought it could be super cool. Some people had none. I was one of those people, had no expectations for this movie. I saw the trailer, thought it would be boring as shit. Saw there was no way they could do this for an hour and a half. I feel like I was kind of confirmed when I saw it. Because there's no character development at all in this movie, what you're going to take away immediately is the power of cinematography and like how important it is to manipulate visuals, create tension that way, because you see the killer for almost the entirety of the runtime, so there can be no tension. You know exactly where he's at. There can be no element of surprise. That's really important because in a horror movie, you have to be able to manipulate the viewer, create a score, get the viewer off guard, catch him by surprise. In this movie, you cannot do that. So you're left with a big, boring hodgepodge of a guy walking around for the vast majority, maybe 60 minutes of the 90, just a guy walking through the forest. There's absolutely no music or score in this movie, so all of the sound you hear, just leaves crunching, crickets, birds chirping, so you have nothing to fill the runtime of him walking around. It's just dead air. And that's really frustrating because you're just kind of sitting there the whole time waiting for kills. All you can do is root for him to kill someone because that's the only action you're going to get in this movie. And it's also when the kills come, you kind of find yourself asking, like, why am I watching this? The kills aren't very rewarding either. The biggest flaw this movie has by far is it does change perspectives a handful of times. As I said, it's like 5 or so minutes collectively of filming of like a normal format. And whenever they go back to that format, you realize immediately like how much better that format is, which takes you out of this movie's immersion completely because every time they showed me the survivors, I was way more engaged when it was a normal filming format. They show you the killer one time in this movie from like the perspective of like a third person where it's actually him, you're not behind him. And I thought he looked a lot cooler than when you see him in third person. His costume's pretty stupid in the third person. Nobody's going to be dressing as that guy for Halloween. So big mistake, in my opinion, to not just fully commit to his POV and give you a little bit of both, because by giving you that contrast, you completely realize immediately that what they're doing now, not as good as the old style. Because as we all know, like slasher movies, horror movies, the villains are iconic. We like to see the killers, their masks. They were the cells of the movie when they look cool. And this guy doesn't look cool when you do see him with his mask from the front. I mean, I think he's a forgettable costume. Nobody's going to want to dress up as this guy for years to come. And obviously, coming into this movie, what I was most excited about, and I'd imagine almost everybody who sees this movie is going to be excited about, is how they did the kills, because we've never seen a movie from the killer's POV that did this well. So I was really interested in how they're going to have fun with this, do some creative things, because we've seen kills with the normal filming format, but I wanted to see how they could use practical effects, do some creative kills from his perspective. I don't really think they fleshed that out enough for it to be effective. And the end result being you only get to see about half the kills directly on screen. Everything else you see is like the aftermath of his damage, like he'll like walk by a body on the ground. You'll see what he did, but you didn't actually get to see it in real time. And I kind of figured out why they did that after a certain scene in particular. I've heard mixed things about the practical effects in this movie, but to me, there was like an all-time terrible practical effect in this movie related to a guy in a machine, and it was just like the corniest looking practical effect. It took me right back to the 70s and 80s. I don't know if they did that on purpose. It was supposed to be campy or something, but to me, I was laughing. My whole theater was laughing hysterically when it went on. It was like so corny. I think that's why they kind of showed you the aftermath of most of the kills, because they realized from the killer's POV how hard it would be to do practical effects in real time, edit the movie. So they kind of avoided it when they could and only stuck to maybe like 2 or 3 kills that were directly head on. But as I said earlier, there is one kill in particular in this movie that is like iconic all-time kill. It's related to yoga, and you're probably going to hear that over and over again in reviews. but my theater was laughing at how ridiculous this is. This is the absolute holy shit moment where you're watching this and it keeps going and going. It was absolutely phenomenal. I will give them props for that. Great scene. For as much walking as you have to endure as a viewer and as much downtime as you have to endure before you do get to the kills, they are bloody when you get to there, you know, like they're over the top violent. But for me personally, I thought the kills were pretty terrible overall. The payoff was just not worth it. I mean, the whole movie to me, because of the tone of the movie, there's no score, there's no tension in any of the kills. It had more of like a hostile snuff film vibe to me than it had a fun vibe, because it just felt like he was doing work, like you're watching work. Like, okay, we finally got them walking, we can get to the kills and got to kill one of these kids. Like, to me, it just wasn't like a fun version of a slasher movie. It could have been fun. Maybe some people have fun with this. I didn't find the kills in this movie fun. A huge letdown for me when it came to the kills in this movie was the lack of creativity in setting up and getting to the kills, actually, because the victims in this movie have such terrible awareness. It's like all-time stupidity required for them to ever be in the positions. Like, a guy's 5 feet behind him and they have no idea he's there. They don't turn around. It just, to me, I wanted more creativity. Things you could do for fun from his POV to set up kills. It just seemed like they wanted to play into the tropes too much of how stupid the victims were. So it was just lazy, in my opinion. It wasn't fun to watch. And for the limited dialogue there is in this movie, there's not more than like 10 or so lines in this movie as an exposition dump. I thought the writing and the dialogue in this movie was pretty much atrocious, like porn level bad. I mean, a handful of lines they are on screen, it's like unwatchable listening to these people talk. There's a scene in this movie in particular where you have 2 people in a car and they're talking about a bear. It's like a 10-minute story about this bear. One of the characters falls asleep. Never felt anything more relatable in my life. I was about 5 seconds from passing out during that scene. I was so bored. But aside from that, is this a movie I find to be a unique experience, like a risky movie, bold, innovative, something I'm glad took a chance? Yes. Is it objectively good and very watchable? Not really. This is pretty much the definition of a movie that was made to be turned off later when you're making out, or it's playing when you're vacuuming, because it's background noise. I think I might have got PTSD from the sound of leaves crunching watching this guy walk through the woods for about an hour. I mean, it's not the worst movie I've seen this year, but it might be the single least rewatchable movie I've watched this year. I never want to rewatch this movie again. With a ton of major changes and tweaks, I feel like there is something really cool there in this genre of the killer's POV. Kind of intrigued if somebody can make it work, but I really hope it doesn't become the next found footage. We don't get a ton of these clones every month, every year. So did you see In a Violent Nature? Do you have any plans of seeing this movie? Did you think it was as boring as I did, or did you think it was innovational? The kills paid off? Comment down below, let me know. As always, if you haven't subscribed, what the hell are you waiting for? More new releases, more scary stuff to come. That's all I got in this video. Peace.